Hello and welcome into another edition of the Stew with JT Brew College Betting Show Week 12 here on Fantasy in Frames. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty, folks. College playoffs are coming. 12-team college playoffs. We're going to go over the regular games to start the show, and at the end here, we're going to break down the college football playoffs, who's where, what needs to happen for certain teams to make their conference championship games and get into the playoffs. We got all that ahead here. You're in the stew.
You up on trades and why you move, you ain't designed to lose. Find you jumping over seemingly nothing, racking up points, makes the game a little more fun to watch. Can drop release, we started with the mock draft and now we making a mockery of the leaderboard. Quite obviously not a scrub, so start an institute, make evaluations like a commissioner do. It's to the point your wife make you watch in a different room. Update your roster and pick and choose when you get some news. Not much that we enjoy more than sifting through new statistics to make it to our end zones through different routes. Universities, institutes, down to homies who click in groups. I introduce you to the Stew with JT Brew.
Welcome in, everybody. The Stew with JT Brew, Week 12. I'm your host, JT, along with my buddy, Benny D. Benny, it's Maction time. We got Tuesday, we got Wednesday, we got Thursday. We got all the Maction games going on. I was going to start off the show jumping into a little game I got going. I got a little bet going right now. I was just pulling up the scores, checking to see where we're at. I did a little a 7-pick parlay. You know how I like to do it. Yep, you got it right behind you there. Exactly. So I got in here. They had a little Maction boost for tonight on DraftKings. So I got in on there on that. I'm pulling up the scores currently right now, what we're looking at on that one. So I've got Buffalo money line and the AJ Henderson anytime TD. They're currently up 3 in the third.
Ooh.
I got Bowling Green. I moved it from I think it was 9.5 at game time. I moved it down to 7. Took Terrion Stewart for a touchdown. They're currently up 31-13. And then I took Toledo. They were 14.5. I moved it to 13. And a Jacquez Stewart touchdown. Right now it's 34-3 Toledo in utter domination. And then I also threw in tomorrow night Ohio against Eastern Michigan. I took that one down to Ohio -7. That was a plus 1885 parlay right now. So I'll keep an eye on that as we get moving throughout the night. We're looking a decent little start here. I got to look and see if my guys get some touchdowns in here to go. Stewart does have a touchdown for Bowling Green, so bam, check that one off the list. Looking back through the other touchdown scores right now. Oh, looks like Gleason has got 2 rushing touchdowns. I almost took Gleason for Toledo. That should have taken that one. That one hurts. And then on the other side, AJ Henderson has a rushing touchdown for Buffalo, so that one's in the books right now. So we just got a little more work to do here, but I think I might have missed it on a Toledo touchdown.
That game is in.
Oh, that one's gonna hurt. Jacquez Stewart, 8 carries, 65 yards, no touchdown in the 34. I almost took Gleason instead of Stewart with a touchdown. So now we don't have to keep you up to date. That game just ended. That's a loser for it, folks. Oh man, I'm gonna hit 6 out of 7 on that day.
I was going to say the rest of those are going to go.
I'm looking fantastic, and I was debating Gleason and Stewart for the touchdown there. I knew I should have went Gleason the QB, punching one in. Oh, it was a fun start to the show. We almost got excited for just a minute and thought we had some action there. Oh man.
Tuesday.
Benny, we'll get in this to all the stuff that happened this last week, but man, it was a little bit of a rough week. We had some games we liked. We had some ones I felt really good about that we put together in a parlay, and we just did not hit last week like I was hoping we would.
It was a wild one. I mean, everything. I mean, I think I took LSU. That game was over in the first quarter. That game was never close. I mean, Alabama, I tell you what, and maybe just LSU's defense is worse than I thought, but man, that Alabama quarterback ran wild. And if he's going to run the ball like that, that team's going to be real tough to deal with because man, he was all over the place.
We did tell you take Jalen Milroe touchdown. We did say take Jalen Milroe rushing touchdown. He was all over that. He
had about 4 of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, Georgia, they got smoked. So, you know, it was a rough one. It was a lot of dogs last week that, you know, did not see coming. So
Yeah, that was a tough one. Indiana, they just fell
first
apart in the
week,
second half.
first week all season they don't cover.
Yeah, first time
And it
all
was
year they
against
don't cover.
Michigan.
It was unbelievable. UCLA, you can see in my
Oh,
tagline there, FU
jeez.
UCLA. My God, they not even did they cover. They came
They
back
won.
and
They
won
won.
against Iowa 20-17. Oh my gosh, they got down 10-0 this game. I'm feeling good about it. And then Iowa's offense just absolutely craps the bed. The rest of the game does nothing post
Nothing.
first quarter and ends up losing that thing. Iowa's quarterback ended up going 6 of 9 for 157 yards and 2 touchdowns. Caleb Johnson, who's been getting a lot of pub lately, he's been running the ball really, really well. Nothing. 8 for 49 and a touch. Oh, it was really frustrating. I'm officially off of UCLA. I'm off the train. No more
Yeah.
UCLA for me. I
Whether
cannot
you're
bet against them. I'm just absolutely out. They have just absolutely single-handedly murdered me. And now we come down to the end of the year. I've got them under 4.5 wins. Now they have 4 with 3 games to go. And now I got to they get knocked off 3 straight. It didn't look like they were going to come close to winning 5 games this year, and now they're right on the verge. That one's crazy. A couple other games we'll talk about it real quick. Benny, I didn't put any money on it because Drew Pine, I said it during the show. I said Drew Pine starts from Missouri instead of Brady Cook. Like, I don't want any part of that game. Is going to be ugly, ugly. If you're going to do anything, you're going to bet the under because both these teams are not going to be able to move the football. This game was a show. It was low scoring. Neither team could do absolutely anything until we get to the fourth quarter, and then shit got wild.
Yeah.
10-9 Missouri lead. They were down 9-3 headed into the second half. Just like I said, no one could move the ball. It was an all field goal kicker show. It was ugly as can be. Ended up getting a touchdown, make it 10-9. Then they got another touchdown, but missed the extra point, making it 16-9. So instead of being up 8, they were only up 7, allowing Oklahoma to finally punch one in the end zone. They scored and made it 16-16 with the extra point. They came back, a fumble by Missouri, returned for a touchdown, made it 23-16. And you thought at that point, Missouri is absolutely toast. There was only 2 minutes left in the game, fumbled and returned 40 yards for a freaking touchdown. I was like, you got to be kidding me. You're just trying to run the ball, like trying to
just run clock.
Overtime, play defense, and get field goal. Nope. Fumbles the ball, return for a touchdown. You're like, this one's over. Missouri hasn't moved the football all day. There's no freaking way they're going to drive for a touchdown. They drive for a touchdown with a minute left. Unbelievable. Tied the game up at 23-23. You're like, what else can happen? Then Jackson Arnold fumbles on the final drive for Oklahoma, returned by Zion Young, 17 yards for a touchdown, and Missouri wins 30-23. I got a text from my buddy, Wright Martin, and he's like, I took Mizzou money line live bet. I was like, no, you didn't.
No way.
That he ends up crushing a live bet on Missouri. I go, dude, you have more balls than me. There was no way I would have bet on Missouri in that game. And I'm about as big of a homer as you can get when it comes to betting sometimes. And I'm like, there is no way I would have put any money on them. But somehow the double back-to-back fumble returns for touchdown, that was freaking wild. And then the late game, BYU holds on to stay undefeated, 22-21. A little bit controversial at the end with a penalty, but they ended up pulling it off against Utah. That was a wild finish as well.
Man, the penalty got a lot of – I think the penalty itself got more talk than the game. It was a great game, but and that – man, I mean, I saw it happen live, and then, they show the replay. It wasn't a great angle. You couldn't really, on the replay, see – but, man, for them to throw a flag in that kind of moment of the game, especially Utah at home as well, it's like, whew, that was a rough one. I'm pretty sure that even the AD for Utah came out.
He was complaining after the game.
Said something like ADs usually don't come out in post-game press conferences, so that was kind of crazy. But, Utah, man, they had to have been just beside themselves with that deal.
The Mississippi with a huge upset of Georgia, 28-10. Jackson Dart hurt. You figured he'd have to throw for 1,000,000 yards. Didn't have it. Trey Harris didn't play again, and yet somehow Ole Miss gets it done. That was a wild, wild game. trying to look at a couple other games we talked about last week. We had we said to put money on Tulane. I'm telling you what, the 3 team that I should have taken that I felt great about. I love Tulane at home against Temple. They were 26.5. They rolled 52-6. I felt great about that game. I really did like Colorado, that they were anywhere from 2 to 4, depending on when you bet on them throughout the week. They ended up winning 41-27. I pretty much watched that entire game. Looked like they were going to roll. They got down early, and then looks like they were going to roll, and then Texas Tech scored a couple times to stay in the game, but they ended up covering the 4.5. And then the other game I really, really liked, I just said Notre Dame was going to just roll Florida State. Florida State's so bad this year. 25.5. I loved it. Notre Dame 52-3. Those were the 3 games we should have been on. We were on them, but we had them in parlays with some other stuff. If you took them solo, you were great. The ones that killed us, UNLV winning by 2 at Hawaii, and just a terrible performance, way out partying all night there in Hawaii. They did not show up. They played ugly. Boise State, I thought, would absolutely hammer a 3-7 Nevada team. They struggled all night and ended up winning 28-21. They couldn't cover the 24. That was the other big one. Me and you both liked LSU at home. It started raining, and then LSU's passing game could not get going. And that was their only advantage in that game, was them throwing the football. And once it started just absolute downpour, Alabama took over.
You knew it was over. I mean, you just knew it. And they could not stop the Alabama running game. And it was, it got ugly quick. And then when that rain got even worse, it was just, you knew it was going to be major trouble for LSU. But that's LSU's probably out of the discussion at this point with the 3rd loss.
Yeah, we'll bring them up at the end, but they're way out on the outside looking in. We'll bring that up as we talk about the playoffs in the end. Let's get into some Week 12 action here. Let's get our first game here. I don't have it on the board here, but we'll talk about Illinois at home, 6-3 against 4-5. Taking my son Walker there for his birthday on Friday, game on Saturday. He's super pumped to go to the Illinois game. Illinois right now, -2.5, over under 47.5. Illini have picked it up this year. A couple disappointing games. Got the nice win against Michigan. Oregon just got smoked, and then just a real disappointing loss to Minnesota in a game it looked like they were going to win. What do you think about the Illini here at home, -2.5 with the over under 47.5?
I like Illinois in this one. They need a bounce back game, and this is the game they can win at home. And they really, if they want to be taken seriously as a whole for the season, they really need to win like 2 out of the next 3 here, get to 8 wins. And that's a pretty darn good season. If you get to 8 wins, you'll get a decent bowl game. But I like their chances here. It's only 2.5. I mean, coming off of 2 losses, I don't see why we can't beat Michigan State at home.
Yeah, I like this. Michigan State coming back. They've lost a few in a row here. Michigan, Indiana beat them 47-10. Illinois averaging 7 points more per game than Michigan State's offense and giving up 3 less. So to me, that's a 10-point difference. At -2.5 is an Illinois take here. And I would jump on this one before it gets to 3. I think this is going to go up as we get closer to game time. I think this game would be probably a pick 'em if it was at Michigan State. So I like Illinois at the home field advantage, -2.5. I'm jumping on the Illini in this one. Let's make our way down here, pull up the screen, make through some of these games. We're not anything you like in the Friday night slate. I don't really like it at all. Wyoming, Colorado State, I'm avoiding. North Texas, UTSA is maybe, if you like UTSA at +2. North Texas had a bunch of opportunities to beat Army last week and could not score inside the 10-yard line. They got in there like 3 times and didn't score, ended up losing 14-3. That's the only one I would think about.
Check out the total in that game.
72.5. Like it's crazy when you think that North Texas just scored 3 points in a game. Now they played Army, who's been really good defensively, but still 72.5. I mean, you're going to have to put on the points on the board every freaking play. That one, that seems real high to me. I would lean the under in that.
I would too. I mean, like you just said, that you're asking these teams to just run wild, man. 72.5 is one of the, that was the only thing I was kind of going through those Friday games, and I saw that number, and I thought, is that right? And then, I mean, that is just a huge number, man.
So if you look at what's scored per game right now, coming into this week, North Texas is averaging 36.6 points a game, 28th in the country. UTSA just under 30 a game. They're 93rd in the country. Both teams' points against are bad, real
Their
bad.
defenses are
North
terrible.
Texas 34 a game. UTSA 32 a game. So both teams combined are giving up 66 a game, and they're scoring a combined 65 a game. So I think that's why that one's up in the 70s. But still,
yeah,
it's a lot of points. I mean, you really are going to have, and you look at North Texas. So other than the last game against Army where they lost 14-3, they're coming off a 45-37 loss to Tulane, a 52-44 loss to Memphis, and a 41-37 win against FAU, and a 52-20 win against Tulsa. So
they would have hit that number every time.
They've been over 70 in every game, but that last game against Army, they've been over 70 and in the 80s in a couple of those games. UTSA, same thing. They just came off a win against Memphis, 44-36. Lost 46-45 to Tulsa, 138-24 against FAU, and 129-20 against Rice. So that one's tough, but still 72. I understand where they're at. The defense haven't been great, but man, that's a ton of points.
That is a ton of points. And I mean, as bad as those defenses are, it's a pretty even matched game in general. So it's not like, I don't know, man, that's so many points, but I probably just watch it because I just like to see what that.
Yeah, it'd be fun if you got fantasy players. It'd be nice for you to jump on that one. I don't even know if I want to talk about this UCLA Washington game. Minus 3.5 over under 47. UCLA just absolutely murdering me. The amount of losses. This team, they've gotten better. I know I talk trash about them every week, and they've gotten better.
They're
4-5 on the year. Washington's 5-5. Well, UCLA is scoring 18.8 points a game, 245th in the country. Points per game against 26-6. They're getting outscored by 8 points a game. This team, yards per game, 320, 218th in the country. Nothing makes sense. Nothing makes sense of how this team has won 3 straight games against Rutgers, Nebraska, and Iowa. I just don't understand it. Washington's coming off a brutal 35-6 loss to Penn State. I can't bet against UCLA anymore, and I cannot in my right mind bet them, even though they've covered almost every game this year.
Yeah, I mean, here's the deal: you got to root against them anyway for your total. Your
I know I'm rooting for Washington. So, now the question is, do I do it again and jinx myself and bet on them, or I just stay back and go like I'm not even going to do anything. I hope they lose.
Yeah, I think I would just sit there and root for Washington and hope they don't screw you on the total as well.
Yeah, man, it's just been utterly brutal watching that. Now, Houston, Arizona, I don't want any part of this game. These two teams have way underperformed this year. Houston 4-5, Arizona super disappointing 3-6. Benny, the one thing we can talk about that we love, Tet McMillan. We jumped over receiving yards. He's got 63 catches, 1,066 and 6 touchdowns. Boom, that's a hit. Check mark that bad boy. We hit that one for the year as we had him over 1,000 yards receiving on the season. That one felt so easy. When we were put it in, I'm like, he had 1,400 yards last year and the over-under was 1,000. And they played terrible. And he's still at 1,000 with a couple games to play. I've already talked about on a couple other shows. He's my wide receiver 1 in this next draft class. I think he's a top 10 pick. If you've not watched him play, jump online, look up Tet McMillan, Arizona, watch some highlights. This guy is he reminds me
and he's getting
a lot of Mike Evans.
A lot.
Yeah, he reminds me a lot of Mike Evans, but he goes up and gets the ball over guys like Randy Moss used to. He'll go up and jump over you because he's 6'4". He'll still jump up over you and reach and extend and catch at the high point. It's just awesome. He's fantastic. So that's the only bet I would even consider in this game. I tried to look up the line. I didn't see it yet on Underdog or anywhere else. I would jump on him over 100 yards receiving this game, but that's the only bet I'd consider taking on this Houston-Arizona game.
Yeah, I'm with you. These are two teams that have not done much of anything this year, and he's definitely the highlight of the game. So, we'll have to wait till Saturday to check that prop total.
So here's a big one. This is going to be my first game that I'm on today, Benny, for Saturday morning early game. It's going to go in my JT Parlay play of the day. I got Texas minus 13.5 at Arkansas. Arkansas starting to fall apart. They played really tough early in the year, had some good games. They're starting to not look good. They've got their quarterback banged up. They just got hammered 63-31 by Mississippi last week. A couple weeks ago, lost 34-10 to LSU. Their big win of the year was upsetting number 4 Tennessee 19-14, but that was when they were playing well. They beat them 19-14, lost by 4 to Texas A&M. They looked like they were getting it together. LSU put it together, and they crushed Mississippi State, then lost to Mississippi. I'm on Texas. I think they win this by 2.
Yeah, I think Texas is kind of getting their groove back. They beat A&M in a tough one, and then they just rolled Florida last week. I mean, just rolled them. So, and there was a lot of people talking Florida up like they were starting to get something going on. So, I'm with you. I think Arkansas is just not, they're not going to be able to hang around at this one. Texas should. I mean, Arkansas is coming off a bye. I didn't look at who they're playing next week. Maybe they got a big game next week, so it could be like a look ahead spot. But
yeah, the big ones for Texas is they get by Arkansas. They got Kentucky, who's starting to fall apart a little bit with the offensive injuries are killing them. But the big one, and we'll talk about it when we talk about the playoffs, they got Texas A&M at Texas A&M to finish the season, which is gigantic because right now both those teams are tied for first in the SEC. So they've got a couple. Texas out of the top 5 or 6 teams probably have the toughest schedule left as far as they've got to go at Texas A&M. Arkansas has not been bad, and then Kentucky, who's doesn't have a good record. They only got 1 win in the SEC, but their 1 win was at home against Georgia. Yeah. So they've got a couple tougher ones in there. Arkansas, things are, like I said, they played tough in the middle of the year. They're huge upset at Tennessee, and now they've got to finish the year out with Texas, Louisiana Tech, and Missouri. So this is a big one for them. I just think Texas ends up getting this one done. I think they win by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Yep.
Colorado, this is another one that's in my JT Parlay play of the day. They're minus 11 at home against Utah. I thought this Utah team was going to be the best team in the Big 12. They've just not been able to get it together on offense. They've not moved the ball. The defense has been okay, but not as good as we thought they would be. Colorado, and we'll talk about this too at the end. We can break down the scenarios. They've got a shot to make the Big 12 championship game. If they win out, they're in. They're in the Big 12 championship game. And if they get in the Big 12 championship game, a win in that game gets them on automatic bid of the playoffs. So that's a nice one here. I don't love it at 11, to be honest with you. They've just had way too many close games, though. I think they're playing well while Utah is not, especially, Utah getting a big disappointment with that loss to BYU last week. I think Colorado gets this game done, but I'm moving this line. I'm going to move it. I'm going to put it in a parlay. I'm going to put it at 7. I think Colorado wins this thing, but it makes me nervous that this could be kind of close.
I like Colorado this week. I think Utah coming off of, a game, they gave it everything against BYU and thought they won the game and didn't. And man, that's kind of a season crusher if you're Utah. They they gave everything in that game and lost. And Colorado is just looking like they are hitting a stride, man. They are just moving the ball at will, and they're kind of high flying. So I don't know. I feel like Colorado could roll them. I mean, it's possible if they can get that offense going. But Utah's a team that doesn't get rolled very often, so that would be a little bit of a surprise. Even when they're a little down, they're just a tough-nosed team. They always kind of hang around. But man, I could see Utah really having a tough time coming off of that one last week.
Yeah, I'm going to get this one probably at least 10. I want it on that 2 score. And then if I can get it a little under, I will. But I do feel like Colorado wins this game. They're playing really well. Stuff is starting to work for them offensively. Travis Hunter's healthy again. He's now looking like the Heisman favorite once again, which I'm hoping. I had a cash out chance on it. I didn't do it. I still have it
What's it
alive.
looking like this week? I mean, after last
I will
week,
pull that one up and see
good.
where we're at here near the end of the show. We're going to pull that one up and take a look at where we're at. Clemson -10 against Pittsburgh, +10. Over under 54. Pittsburgh at home. This was the game they were looking forward to, and then they got upset by Virginia last week. Huge loss by Pittsburgh in that game, as they thought they were still in the mix in the ACC, and then that loss just pummeled them, dropped them to 7-2. Clemson now 7-2. They're both a game behind Miami. So whoever
Miami
wins
lost
this
too,
one,
so it's probably still some wild stuff to happen the next 3 weeks here. But yeah, if Clemson could have won that game with Miami losing, that puts them in the driver's seat, But now,
we still got SMU, Clemson, Miami, Louisville, Pittsburgh in the mix. Pittsburgh, that loss last week really killed them. They're not out of it yet, but they're close. They'd have to win this week. A loss this week absolutely puts them out of it. Clemson's not totally out of it for the ACC if they lose this one, but it would definitely hurt their chances. I want to lean Clemson in this game. I feel like Clemson's a better team than Pittsburgh. I know Pitt's played pretty well this year, but I think they've been playing out of their shoes a bit. I just don't think they're as good as their record is. And I thought that home loss of Virginia, who I don't think is very good, last week kind of was telling. I think Clemson gets this thing done.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's such a crazy conference, man. I don't think Miami's as good as their record either. I mean, they could have easily lost 3 games.
They could have 3 or 4 more losses easily.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a crazy conference. So nothing would shock me, but I agree. I think Clemson is the better team, and they should win this game. I definitely think Pittsburgh's a little fraudulent. So I would lean Clemson here for sure.
Heading back down the list here, Tulane, a team that I think is playing really well lately. Big matchup, 8-2 against 7-2 Navy. It's a 7-point game. I'm liking Tulane here. They played really well lately. They're getting things going offensively. Navy got off to that great start, but they just have not done much lately. I mean, after starting the season 1-2, Tulane has just absolutely lit it up as they've won 7 straight. And they've been rolling people. The closest game was that 8-point win over North Texas, but they've really piled up the points. They've looked good. I'm all over Tulane on this one, -7.
I'm with you, man. Tulane, I think if you look back, their 2 losses were tough games too. I mean, they were close games against pretty good teams.
They lost by 7 to Kansas State and lost by 15 at Oklahoma. So two tough losses to start the year.
Right. And man, since then, I mean, they've just routed people. I mean, I'm with you. I like this one. I liked it last week.
Like I said, I loved it last week. I should have just absolutely hammered Tulane last week, as I really liked where they were at on those games. Going down through the list, see there's a couple more here that jump out at us. Syracuse has been my team. Tough loss last week. Tough one. They're 8.5 at Cal. This game has me nervous. Cal's played everybody pretty tough. They've been good at home. Syracuse has to go across the country. If this game was at Syracuse, I'm all over Cuse in this game, but I'm nervous about what Cal can do. Cal comes in at 5-4, Syracuse 6-3. Syracuse's defense has just not looked great of late. They've really struggled. They basically making the offense try to score every time. Real tough 37-31 loss at Boston College last week for Syracuse after a big comeback 38-31 win against Virginia Tech. So they've been back up and down. They've had a lot of close games. To me, if I'm taking something in this game, I'm taking Syracuse in the points because I think this is going to be a close game.
Oh yeah.
I think at 8.5, I mean, California just won by 10 at Wake Forest, 44-7 Oregon State the week before that, but lost by 1 to NC State, lost by 2 to Pittsburgh, a team that hammered Syracuse because of 5 turnovers. They lost by 1 to Miami. They lost by 5 to Florida State, and that's Florida State's only win this year. So that's where you're at a little bit. They also won at Auburn. So this Cal team, very hard team to figure out as they've kind of been all over. They've lost some bad teams. you're telling me that Cal loses by 5 against Florida State, their only win of the year, and then they turn around and lose by 1 to Miami in a game they were way up on. I mean, this team is all over the place. I'm taking Syracuse the 8.5 here. I just think these teams, Syracuse is not playing great. Cal's been up and down. 8.5 to me just seems like a whole lot of points. I think I'm jumping on Syracuse here. I think Syracuse ends up losing this game. I hate to say it. I think they lose this game, but I think they cover.
I don't trust Cal to cover.
I don't trust Cal either.
I mean, you know what I mean? It's like they're not the kind of team that's going to cover as a favorite. Like they are the kind of team you might want to like snag as a weird underdog. But these last 2 teams they've played are not good, and they barely beat them. They should have probably covered against Oregon State, and who was it they played last week? These are bad teams. Wake Forest is no good. So I'm with you, man. If you're doing anything in this game, you got to take the points. Syracuse they're definitely no worse than California. To me, this seems like it should be very least a field goal. So I like that one.
Yeah, I think Syracuse can win this game. I don't trust it, but like 8.5, that just seems like so many points to me.
That's too much, man.
That seems like way too much. I'm on Syracuse 8.5. Other big game, LSU. Can they bounce back? Number 22 in the country. Tough loss. Now they head to Florida, -4.5, over under 55. The question is whether DJ Lagway is going to play for Florida in this game. I think Nussmeier gets right after that bad game last week. Florida's defense has not been great. I think Nussmeier lights them up in this game. I like LSU. I'm taking them in my JT Parlay play of the day. I like them to over 4.5.
Yeah, man. LSU is like my UCLA. I just every time I bet against them, they beat me, and every time I bet on them, they screw me. So it's like I don't know what to make of LSU anymore. But I think last week was just definitely. I think if that had been a little bit more of a not so much of a weather game that they could have, hung around in that game. It just. I don't know, though. But I don't think Florida's great. And I think LSU, if they want to salvage their season, they're going to have to obviously win out. And not only that, they probably got to win by some serious margin to do it. So that's what you got to hope for if you're taking the Tigers this week.
Yeah, this is a strictly gut pick on that. Garrett Nussmeier is going to have a big comeback game.
Yeah.
He had by far his worst game. People have been talking about whether he was going to come out in the draft or stay. I think he should stay. I think he has a legit shot to be the QB1 in 2026 if he comes back and gets another year. Because people forget. I mean, he's a highly talented guy, but this is his first year. I mean, Jaden Daniels won the Heisman there last year. This is his first year as a starter. I think he comes back, gets another year on his belt. I like him a lot. So he's a guy. I'm just betting on his talent. I think he can just light up that Florida secondary. So that's where I'm going on that one. Notre Dame is the 2:30 game, 22.5 point favorite against Virginia. Virginia just getting the upset of Pittsburgh. What do you think about Notre Dame? They just had a monster win last week, just utter domination in a game I thought they would crush Florida State. They did. Can they do it 2 weeks in a row? Is they're right in the mix for this playoff berth? Obviously, they're not in the conference, so they can't win the conference. They have to get one of the buys. One of the berths that's not an automatic. So they got to keep winning, and they got to win impressively. Do you think they got enough to take out Virginia by 3-4 scores here?
That's a lot. I mean,
is a lot.
If you look at it, Notre Dame, besides the Northern Illinois loss, has pretty much blown everyone out since. Mm-hmm. Now their schedule's not been crazy tough, but that's a lot of points, and Virginia's kind of sneaky. So I don't know. I think I would lean to the underdog here and take the points. I definitely think Notre Dame's going to win this game, no doubt about that. But it could be one of those. It could be one of those sneakier close games than you might think.
Yeah. So here, I'll give you the last couple games for Virginia here, and this tells you how sneaky they've been this year. So they played Louisville. Louisville beat them 24-20. So they lost in a close 3-point game to them. Everything else for Virginia has been a little while. So they beat Boston College by 10, lost to Louisville by 4. So they were right in that game. They lost by 17 to Clemson. Carolina, they played terrible, and then they had the nice bounce back 5-point win against Pittsburgh. I'm with you. I mean, Notre Dame's looked great lately, especially on offense. They look like they've picked it up, but this seems like a lot of points. I feel like they win, but they win by like 17, 20 in this game as opposed to totally blow them out. So I'm probably staying off this game, but if I took it, I would lean Virginia 22.5. I'd lean the points on that one.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Do you think Penn State can take Purdue 28.5 right now?
Again, they should. Purdue's by far one of the worst teams in the Big Ten.
8-1 versus 1-8. Purdue's a 1-win team this year. Absolutely cost me a huge parlay when they lost by 1 to Illinois. I had Illinois covering. They've gotten absolutely shellacked lately. 45-0 to Ohio State. 26-20 to Northwestern, 35-0 against Oregon, the 50-49 game against Illinois where they were down 21 at halftime and came back, 52-6 Wisconsin, 28-10 Nebraska, 38-21 Oregon State, 66-7 Notre Dame, and the week 1 win against FCS Indiana State, 49-0 is all they've got for themselves. I know it seems like a lot of points. I think Penn State absolutely puts it to them at home. I'm actually going to bet this game and bet it with confidence. I'm going to buy the hook and get it down to 28, and I'm going to take Penn State, even though Penn State's on the road. I think they just absolutely put it to Purdue. They're in a prime position here for the playoffs. They want to make sure anything happens, any kind of upset loss, and they end up with 2 losses and not make the Big Ten championship game, that they solidify themselves as a playoff team. And they got Purdue, Minnesota, Maryland coming up. So it's not like they have any monster showdown with somebody, Michigan, Ohio State, somebody that they, are like, we got that team coming up. So I think they play loose this week. They just hammered Washington 35-6. I think they just pummel Purdue.
Yeah, I could see it for sure. And it's definitely the kind of game where, Penn State's not been as explosive on offense as people thought they were going to be. This is the kind of game where you can really kind of run one up if you want. And I think I could see them doing it. It's like it's kind of a get right game for your offense. And I could definitely see them winning this game 45-10 or something like that.
Yeah, Purdue has really struggled to score. They got the 20 points against Northwestern, who's also bad, but they got shut out by Oregon and Ohio State. Even if they only score 31, I can see this being a 31-3 game, 31-0, 35-0. So I think Purdue Penn State gets it done. Usually I'd be like, man, this is too many points on the road, but I think Purdue is really, really bad, and Penn State needs to make a point. They need to hammer these teams that are bad, so the committee looks at them and goes, "Oh, okay, they're hammering teams are supposed to."
Yeah, I agree.
This is kind of an interesting game, Benny. I wasn't really originally going to talk about this game, but we'll take a look at it. SMU 17-point favorites against Boston College. SMU absolutely begged their way into the ACC. They're like, you got to let us in. We got to get in. They are number 14 in the country right now. SMU 8-1 on the season. They are right there with that Miami loss. They're now first place in the ACC. SMU a chance to get in the championship and make the playoffs. They're scoring 40 points a game. This SMU team is. They're lighting it up. They're playing well. Do they keep going and they keep rolling against Boston College, who's a sneaky 5-4? As Boston College coming off that nice 6-point win against Syracuse, they lost by 4 to Louisville, 21 to Virginia Tech, 10 to Virginia. Beat Western Kentucky, beat Michigan State, and lost by 6 to Missouri, and beat Florida State in the opener. So they've been up and down, back and forth, but this has been a pretty tough out for most people this year. Boston College has not really got rolled by many teams.
No, I was just going to say I would take Boston College in the points. I just think 17 is too much. SMU probably pull this one out. But man, Castellanos and Boston College are just kind of one of those gritty teams. They hang around, And I could even see Boston College pulling a crazy upset here. I really could. So I definitely lean Boston College with this one.
Yeah, money line plus 525 for Boston College.
Yeah.
I'm going to skip the next couple games because they're ugly, ugly, ugly. Got any thoughts on USC Nebraska? Miller Moss getting benched for USC. Now there's talk that USC's 5-star rated quarterback is going to flip his commitment from them to Colorado after all the struggles they've had lately. I don't like Nebraska. USC is making me nervous. 5-4 Nebraska, 4-5 USC, 9-point spread. I don't like this game at all. I don't feel like I like either one of these teams. The spread's way too high. If it was like a -2, I'd probably take USC at home. But 9 points at home for USC starting the quarterback for the first time this year, I just can't do that. And I don't trust Nebraska to take the 9 points on Nebraska.
No, this is what definitely. This is one of those games that's it's a high variance where it wouldn't shock me if Nebraska won the game. And then it also wouldn't shock me if USC covered. So I'm with you, man. These are two teams that are like impossible to bet because week to week you just don't know what team's going to show up. So it's a hard one for me.
Let's jump down to Missouri, South Carolina. My guys, Missouri, still no word on Brady Cook. 12.5-point dogs out South Carolina. They're playing great. Missouri coming off that great win. No Brady Cook. I don't want any part of this game. If he doesn't play, even if he does play, he's got the injury to his hand. This one's ugly. I'm staying it away. Right now, I would lean South Carolina with how well they're playing with Missouri on the road here. But they've been gritty and been in games. I mean, the only 2 losses for Missouri, absolute blowouts at Texas A&M and at Alabama. This would be one of those spots you're like, oh, if Drew Pine starts with how good South Carolina's defense is, this one could get ugly for Missouri. I hate to say it. I don't believe in my Tigers this week. I think they could be in trouble.
Well, I'm definitely not going to argue with you. You know more about this Missouri team than I definitely would. I wasn't loving Missouri this week anyway. So if you're telling me you don't like it, then maybe we should look at South Carolina in this one.
The South Carolina's been tough. They're on a roll lately. They've been playing really good here. Both these teams, 7-2 is Missouri. South Carolina is 6-3. But if you look at South Carolina's schedule of late, they're coming off a really nice 28-7 win at Vanderbilt. In a game where they were a 7-point favorite. I thought Vandy would cover in that game. South Carolina dominated. They're coming off a 44-20 win against Texas A&M, who's top 10. So, I mean, they beat Texas A&M, crushed Oklahoma at Oklahoma 35-9. That's 3 in a row. And that's after they had a 2-point loss at Alabama, 27-25, in a game that went down to the wire. And then they lost 27-3 at home against Ole Miss in a game where they had injuries and just couldn't get the offense going at all. And then they have a 3-point loss at home against LSU is their other loss. And they have a 31-6 win against Kentucky before Kentucky beat Georgia. So you go through the schedule. I mean, South Carolina's been pretty tough. To me right now, I hate to bet against my Tigers, but at 12.5, I think South Carolina gets this thing done. I just don't know how Missouri moves the ball against this defense without Brady Cook in there.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I want to leave South Carolina and Missouri. I mean, their season's on the line because technically, if they win this game, they could still have a shot at it. But
both these teams have a shot to technically, a lot of tiebreakers, especially Missouri, because they're going to have head-to-head losses that 2 of the teams are tied with. So it'd be a real tough one for them. But there's a lot of teams still in the mix. We got 2 games left here, and then we're going to jump in for the last 15, 20 minutes, and we're going to talk about the college football playoffs. Benny, let's jump in down here to one of the last games, a big one, 6:30 game Central Time. Tennessee +10 at Georgia, -10, 48.5 over/under in this one. Georgia coming off the real tough loss. Carson Beck went from QB1 in this draft class to now people are like, does he even get taken in the first 3 rounds? Pretty tough fall for him. I still think he's got some skills. Obviously, when you've been as good as Georgia's been, when you take a couple losses, people lose their mind. 2 losses, just real ugly last week, only putting up 10 points against Ole Miss. But Ole Miss, underrated defense, a very, very underrated defense. So big one here for Georgia. If they can get Tennessee, they got UMass and Georgia Tech to finish it out, which is a nice schedule for them. Tennessee on the other side, they can get by Georgia. They got UTEP Vandy to finish things out. So pretty interesting here. Is 10 too much for Georgia? Do you think Tennessee stays in this game?
It does feel like it's too much. I do think Georgia's going to win. I need them to win for the future bet that I have. But I do think they're going to win. It's, coming off a loss and Tennessee on the road, it just feels like, but 10 might be too many. I mean, this game, it might come down to the very end,
Yeah, Tennessee, technically the higher ranked team. They're number 7 in the country at 8-1. They're only lost to South Carolina and Georgia, number 12 at 7-2. Though I will say this, I did see a ranking. Georgia technically right now has the hardest schedule in the country. So they've played the hardest schedule in the country, playing Kentucky, Clemson, Alabama, Auburn, Texas, Florida, Ole Miss so far, and now they'll add Tennessee to the mix. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 top 25 teams. And it's been a very difficult out in Kentucky so far this year.
Yeah, that's a crazy schedule. I think Georgia gets it done, man. I would even lean to them covering, but probably not what I'm going to bet. But should be a good game.
Yeah, this one I'm nervous about the offense for Georgia. Tennessee was just smoking people earlier in the year, but I'm worried about their offense really being able to do a lot against this tough Georgia defense. This one might be a no play for me because I again, like we've said before, I could easily see this going a bunch of different directions and not even think much about it. Like, oh, that was crazy or that's not crazy at all. I could see that going. The last game I want to bring up, and this one's been really interesting. BYU undefeated, just came off that win. They're a 3-point favorite at home against Kansas. You would think they would be a much bigger favorite, but Kansas is playing really well lately. Kansas is just 3-6. BYU number 6 in the country, 9-0, and they're only a 3-point favorite at home. That always makes it scary to me. I think BYU's played a pretty easy schedule so far. People expected Kansas to be better. They had some injuries, got up to a slow start, and their schedule's been much more difficult than people thought. 6-point loss to Illinois, a 3-point loss to UNLV, a 4-point loss to West Virginia, 11-point loss to TCU, a 4-point loss to Arizona State. So they've had a lot of close games, crushed Houston, lost by 2 to Kansas State, and then a huge upset last week, taking out Iowa State, knocking them kind of out of the running for the Big 12, 45-36 over Iowa State. I saw a lot of people on Kansas. I think I'm kind of leaning Kansas, which is really crazy to say here against BYU. At 3-6 going into an undefeated team, and you're only a 3-point dog, but I kind of like Kansas in this game.
Yeah, I kind of like Kansas, but I will say BYU, if they can win this game, they probably would run the table because they've got Arizona.
They get a tough one at Arizona State, which would be a toughie, but Houston has not been very good this year.
Terrible. So, yeah, I guess you can't say. I mean, yeah, you're right. The Arizona State game would be a little tougher, but man, I think I'm with you. I think I lean Kansas. Kansas played a tougher schedule by far. And BYU, as much as they beat up on some bad teams, man, they got taken to the wire by Utah last week. Probably should have lost. So
their 2 biggest wins were earlier in the year. SMU's only losses to them. They beat SMU 18-15. And then in just a crazy game where Kansas State played horrible, they won 38-9 at home against Kansas State. So those are their 2 big wins of the year so far for BYU. Just be really interested to see what happens here with this one.
Yeah, I would lean Kansas. Take the points, take the field goal. But yeah, that should be a good game.
All right, Benny, here for the last part of the show here, we're going to break down a little bit of who we think is going to win. We've got it written down as kind of where they just had the college show on ESPN tonight, saying kind of where teams are ranked, everything. We're going to go through the rankings here. There's a bunch of teams in the top 25. I don't know if we really need to talk much about them because you got to be in the top 12 to get in. The one team outside of the top 12 that has a big shot getting in is Army. Right now is number 24 in the rankings. They're 9-0, undefeated, but they have the easiest schedule in the country so far right now. That's going to work against them, even though they're undefeated and their Army. The easiest schedule in the country is just not something they like to reward a lot of times in these scenarios. So they're out. I'll just run through the list real quick and then we'll talk about it. 25 Tulane's 8-2. Army's 24 at 9-0, Missouri 23 at 7-2, LSU 22 at 6-3, South Carolina 21 at 6-3, Clemson 20 at 7-2, Louisville 6-3 is number 19, 18 Washington State 8-1. Now remember, Washington State also not in a conference as they're technically in the Big 12 the Pac-12, but there's only two teams. It's them and Oregon State. So a win there, they got to get up in that top 12 to get in. Right now, they're sitting at 8-1 and number 18. Colorado 7-2, but again, said they control their own destiny. If they win out, they'll make the Big 12 championship game. A win in the Big 12 championship game would get them in. They're currently 17th in the rankings. Kansas State, who's one of Colorado's losses, is 16. They're 7-2. At 15's Texas A&M at 7-2. They still can win their way in the SEC championship game. SMU big at number 14 right now at 8-1. Nice chance they can get in up there in the ACC championship game if they can keep winning. Georgia right now is number 13 at 7-2. They're the first team out of the playoffs right now, but obviously a big win against Tennessee would move them up the rankings if they can get that win. So they're just outside right now. Boise State is the one team getting in that's not a lock, but they would win their division. Boise State's number 12 right now. They're 10-1. They're first in the Mountain West. They're the one team that's not a G. That they're top ranked non-G4 school. So that's them in there with their only loss coming to number 1 Oregon. So that they do have a good loss on the schedule. If you can, say a loss is good. Ole Miss jumping up to 11 at 8-2. But here's the thing with Ole Miss: Florida, Mississippi State to finish out the year.
Man,
for Ole Miss.
I tell you what, it's too bad because that defense was really impressive last week. And you know how defense, especially in a playoff scenario, it's like you get down to the end of the year and man, sometimes defense will take over, and carry you through a playoff situation. But yeah, they gotta probably win out really to get in there. It's going to be wild with all these.
It's good, and you got to look. That's a good shot. I mean, right now you've got them at number 11, so they're in, and they've got a bye week this week. Florida, Mississippi State. Mississippi State should be an easy. They should crush them. Florida's going to be a little bit of a tougher game, but they're a better team than Florida. They win those two, they get to 10-2. I don't know how you can keep a 10-2 Ole Miss team out.
Yeah, and then you got Tennessee. If they lose to Ole Miss, going into next week, you might see, you might see Ole Miss ranked above Tennessee.
Yeah, they could jump up because right now you got Tennessee is number 7 in the rankings, but they're the 8th seed at 8-1. Huge game against Georgia this week. Obviously, they lose to Georgia. That drops them down, gets Georgia ahead of them as Georgia's back there. And Ole Miss with the bye week is just kind of sitting pretty looking. Ole Miss is at 11. Right in front of them is Alabama at 7-2. Alabama's got Mercer this week. That's going to be a 60-point blowout. Right. They're going to hammer them, so no worry there for Alabama there. They're going to get to 8-2, stay in the top 10. Right now, Miami is the number 9 seed with the loss. They dropped from top 4 all the way to 9 at 9-1 with the loss last week, but they're still first in the ACC, and they're technically the 4 seed because they're technically the first place team in the ACC. So they would get a bye week in that first week, but still a couple games left, and Miami's got to go to Syracuse to end out the year, which could be a very interesting game there as well.
Yeah,
and then they got to win the ACC, and then they got to win the ACC championship game. That could be a SMU Miami shootout for the ACC championship.
Yeah,
and I think if Miami loses the ACC championship game, regardless, whoever it is, SMU, anyone, I think a 2-loss Miami team's out with how close some of their other games have been with their schedule. I think an SEC 2-loss team gets in over Miami pretty easily. Number 8 right now, but the number 9 seed is Notre Dame at 8-1. Again, Notre Dame is set up to kind of just roll this thing and finish it off. if they can do it. They're in prime position. We said it at the beginning of the year, looking at their schedule. They had a couple big games on the schedule. If they could somehow pull off those games, obviously the big one was the opener against Texas A&M, which they won 23-13. Then they had the really big upset at home against Northern Illinois, 16-14 after beating Texas A&M. But they've absolutely, like you said, rolled people since then and got a nice win against Louisville, a nice win against Georgia Tech, nice win against Navy, hammered. And this is the thing is they've hammered Florida State, hammered Purdue, hammered Miami, hammered Stanford. They've hammered the teams that are bad. So they've looked good in those wins. They've got Virginia, Army, and USC left. Not a cakewalk. Army's still undefeated. Army could get a big win. If they end up winning that game, that would put a lot on Army jumping up in the rankings. And then again, USC hasn't been great, but you got to go to USC to end the year, which is never easy.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing. There's some of these teams that kind of control their own path and will basically knock other teams out if they can do it. I mean, Boise State, if they win out, they probably will. They're in. So that's one less spot right there. And Army, it would be crazy. But if say they pull the upset against Notre Dame and they win out, they're probably
they're the other team. They might not get it, but if they finish undefeated with a win over Notre Dame at the end of the year, you would think they got to get some consideration. And then do you turn around and go, okay, Boise State won the Mountain West, which is obviously tougher. And Boise State, but their only loss being to Oregon.
Yeah, that's probably a tough case, but that would be. You're right. That's toughy, but. Yeah, so it's really going to be these last 3 weeks are going to be.
Oh, they're going to be wild. Like we said, we just talked about BYU. Right now, they're number 6, but they're the 3rd seed because technically they're first place in the Big 12, which would get them a bye week for winning the Big 12. So they're a 3 seed right now, 9-0. They're first in Big 12, number 5, but the 7th seed is Indiana as the Big 10 has 4 teams in the top 5. If you can believe that, Indiana. 5th overall, 7th seed, though, at 10-0. They play at Ohio State next week. Yep. At Ohio State next week is the big one for them. Yep. Obviously, an Indiana loss. Do they still get in? If they only have one loss to Ohio State? They've had a very easy schedule, mind you, but
and they've rolled teams too.
Yep.
So So that's a one-loss Big Ten team. In your only loss, I'd say this: if they have even a good showing against Ohio State, if they just don't get blown out, you know what I mean, and then they win their last 2, I don't see how you don't put Indiana in there.
I think if you end up with 4 Big Ten teams with all one loss, I think they got to get in.
Yeah,
I think they got to get in. That's a toughie. So then you get Penn State is number 4. They're the 6th seed, as we talked about them earlier. They're 8-1. They're only lost a 7-point loss to Ohio State in a tough game. They've got a pretty easy schedule to finish it out that you think they roll and get in. But they're at this point, Penn State's trying to catch up and get in the Big Ten championship game. Unless Oregon or Ohio State trips up, it looks like those two are going to be the teams. Two teams in the Big Ten championship, which means Penn State and Indiana. The one nice thing for them is they don't make the championship, but they also don't take another loss, and they end the year with 1 loss. You would think that would get both of them into the playoffs as at-large bids.
Yeah. No, it's good. Every week from here on out, it's going to be, gloom and doom for a couple teams, and then it'll be, this team's right there, and then the following week it could be a completely different scenario. So this is
and then
pretty cool.
At number 3 we've got Texas. They're technically the number 2 seed right now, as they are in first place in the SEC, 8-1 overall, but they have had a little easier schedule than a lot of other teams. Again, we talked about they've got that big matchup with Texas A&M in the last game of the season at Texas A&M, so that one's going to be a really interesting one. Number 2 is Ohio State. Even though number 2 overall, they're in the number 5 seed because they're not winning the different. So just as a reminder on how this 12-team playoff works for everybody, Wills, before I go into that, Oregon is number 1, still number 1, undefeated, 9-0. They are the number 1 overall seed. So the top 4 seeds are the Big Ten, SEC, ACC, and Big 12 winner. So those 4 conferences, their conference winner automatic bid in, and they get a bye week, and they get a home game in the second round of the playoffs. So those are locked in. It doesn't matter if you're ranked 16th or you're ranked second. If you win your division, you win your conference, you got a bye week. That's the way they made the rules. So there's going to be some people upset about that, but that's the rules. So and because there's no divisions. Yep. Yeah. And now there's no divisions like in the past where we had like the East and West or North and South in different leagues. Yeah. There is no divisions in college football now. It's everyone plays through. The 2 best records play in the conference championship game. So they still are going to have the conference championship games.
Yep.
My guess is if you get into that, we'll see if you lose that conference championship game, if that goes against you and hurts you for an at-large bid. I think it's going to hurt some teams. I think the Big Ten and the SEC, it won't hurt. I think the ACC and the Big 12, if you lose that conference championship game, I think you're out.
You're in trouble. Yeah, you're going to be in trouble, especially if those 2 teams already have 2 losses. Then it's almost like the loser of that game is done for,
Mm-hmm.
So they're doing the seeds, though, based on not necessarily the championship game, but the regular season.
So what they're going to – so the breakdown here is that the top 4 is each division champion, and then the 1 through 4 seed is based off where you're ranked. So if you're the higher ranked team, you get the 1 seed. If you're the next highest ranked team, so like right now, if it broke down today, say college football season was over today, number 1 seed would be Oregon, number 2 seed would be Texas, number 3 seed would be BYU, and the number 4 seed would be Miami. And they would all be the conference championships. The next seeds in would be the 5th seed would be Ohio State because they're the next team that is the highest ranked. So they're number 2 overall, but they're the 5th seed because they didn't win their conference because Oregon would be the winner. 6th seed would be Penn State. 7th seed would be Indiana. 8th seed would be Tennessee. 9th seed would be Notre Dame. The 10th seed would be Alabama. The 11th seed would be Ole Miss, and Boise State would get the last seed at 12, with Georgia right now just missing out. SMU, Texas A&M, Kansas State, Colorado, all with 2 losses, other than SMU with the 1, all missing out on that last spot.
Gotcha. So I guess what I'm saying, though, is like if, say you get to the end of the season, regular season, before the conference championship games, are they saying right at that point, whoever the conference champion is, or are they saying the winner of that conference championship game is
winner of the conference championship game?
The championship. Yep. Okay.
So they're not doing a regular season champion anymore since there's no divisions. It's whoever wins the conference championship game technically wins the conference.
Say Oregon goes undefeated. They go to the championship game of the Big Ten against Ohio State.
If it holds right now, it would be them and Ohio State in a rematch. Right. Of the game that Ohio State lost to Oregon by 1. If it ended today, Ohio State would play Oregon.
That game is for a bye as well. Not only is it to win your conference, but it's for a bye. So
it's for the bye seed. Yep. So you get the number 1 seed as opposed to getting, you get the 1 seed as opposed to getting the 5 seed.
You get crowned the champion in your conference, and you get a bye in the tournament. So Ohio State, if they can go into that game and beat them. And now all of a sudden, like they're in the driver's seat to win the whole thing potentially. It's
absolutely.
That's cool. I like how it's like you said. There's going to be, the winner of the SEC or whatever, or the ACC. It's like, well, they're going to look at that and go, this team shouldn't be getting by. But I mean, that's just the way they set it up. So. It is what it is.
Yeah. So, like looking at the standings, I'll jump down in here real quick. So, looking at the ACC currently, SMU is in first place. They're right now. They're technically out of the playoffs. They're number 14. They're 8-1, but they're undefeated in conference play. They're 5-0. So technically, they're in first place, even though Miami is right now. Because Miami's 9-1, they have 1 more game played. Miami's technically rated above them because they're 5-1 in the conference. So then you have Clemson, who's 7-2, 6-1. After that, you have Louisville with 2 losses and Pittsburgh with 2 losses. So right now, as it stands, Miami, Clemson, and SMU are 3 teams fighting it out for the two spots in the ACC championship game. Whoever wins in that gets in. Whoever loses, I suspect would be out. SMU, like I said, the big Boston College game at Virginia, then home for Cal to finish out the year for them. Very winnable schedule for them. Clemson, on the other hand, they've got Pittsburgh this week, then Citadel, and then a very difficult game against South Carolina to finish out the year. So Clemson, probably the most difficult schedule of those 3 to finish out. And then Miami on the other side, after coming off the 5-point loss to Georgia Tech, they've got to bye. So they've only got 2 games left. They're at home for Wake Forest and at Syracuse in the last game. So all 3 of those teams still in it. SMU would have to lose 2 out of the last 3 not to get in the championship game. That means it comes down to Clemson and Miami. Obviously, Miami wins out, they're in. If Clemson and Miami and SMU win out, say none of them loses at the end here, right now, Miami would get in by the fact that they have the same conference record, but Miami has a better overall record because Clemson has the loss to Georgia as their other loss. So it would be Miami, SMU in the championship game. So really it's SMU, Clemson, Miami are the 3 teams fighting it out in the ACC. The Big 12, we'll talk about them next. Right now, BYU leading the way, 9-0, undefeated, 6-0 in the conference. They've got Kansas, Arizona State, Houston to finish things up. Colorado, 7-2 overall, 5-1 in the conference. So they're actually 1 game ahead of Arizona State, Iowa State, and Kansas State, and West Virginia, who are all 4-2 in the conference right now. So Colorado, if they win out, they make the championship game because their last 3 games are Utah, Kansas, Oklahoma State. They do not play BYU, so they could technically right now, if it ended today, BYU, Colorado would be playing for the Big 12 championship game and a shot in the playoffs. Arizona State, Iowa State, Kansas State all have a shot to get in. They got to have some upsets. Arizona State has the hardest schedules. They got Kansas State, BYU, Arizona to finish it off. So tough one for Arizona State. Iowa State was in the driver's seat, lost back-to-back weeks to Texas Tech, Kansas. Now they're in trouble. They need help. They got Cincinnati, Utah, Kansas State. And then Kansas State, 7-2, but 4-2 in the conference. Their big help is that they beat Colorado. So they lost a just huge upset for Kansas State loss last week, losing to Houston by 5. I did not see that one coming. They're not playing very well lately. Arizona State, Cincy, Iowa State. So 3 tough games for Kansas State there. Kansas State would need to win out, have Colorado lose. If that happened, Kansas State could jump them and get into the championship game against BYU.
So Big 12 was one of those 4 teams that gets a bye, though, right?
Yep, automatic.
So Colorado, dude, could get into the Big 12 championship game, win it, and have a bye.
Yes, they would. They would most likely, with the way the standings are right now, they would probably be the 4 seed.
Yeah, but
which is pretty wild.
That's crazy that they're sitting in a spot right now where they literally could end up with a first round bye in the playoff. Mm-hmm. I mean, that would be kind of cool.
It would be kind of cool. And like we said on the other side, right now,
that would piss some people off.
It would. Indiana, Oregon are the top 2 teams of the Big 10. So technically, if it ended today, Indiana, Oregon would be the championship game. But like we said, in a week, Indiana has to play Ohio State. Yeah. So if they would upset Ohio State, it would be Indiana, Oregon in the championship game. If Ohio State beats Indiana, and obviously doesn't lose any of their other games, it would be Ohio State, Oregon in the championship game for the Big 10. But you would assume a 1-loss Penn State and a 1-loss Indiana team would be in, as these teams are ranked 1, 2, 4, and 5 right now. So 4 of the top 5 teams are ranked in the Big 10. So you got to figure Indiana gets in. I just don't right now. I don't see how any way Indiana doesn't get in unless they just absolutely get crushed by Ohio State and then somehow play a really close game with Purdue in the last game of the year, which I don't think would happen. I think they crushed Purdue. So I think, as long as they don't get hammered by Ohio State, even if they do get hammered by Ohio State, a 1-loss Indiana team in the Big 10, I think they're in.
Yeah,
I think they're in. The only thing would be if they get hammered and the voters go against them and they drop to like 14th in the poll, would be the one thing to knock them out.
You think there could be 4 SEC and 4 Big Ten. I mean, that's
now.
pretty
If you
crazy.
look at the rankings right now, that's what it is. It's 4 SEC, 4 Big Ten, 1 ACC, 1 Big 12, and then Boise State and Notre Dame taking the last 2 spots, at large berth spots.
Man, that'd be a little bit boring, in my opinion. I mean, it wouldn't, because it's still going to be the first, playoff. But man, I almost hope it gets a little more mixed up.
Well, it could be some wild matchups too, depending on where these teams are end up ranking and who's playing who. So the last team we have to talk about before we kind of close out the show here is SEC. So SEC right now, if things ended today, it would be Tennessee, Texas A&M in the SEC championship game, as they're both 5-1 overall in the conference. Tennessee's 8-1, Texas A&M 7-2. Texas, who's number 3 overall right now, is 8-1, so they're a game better than Texas A&M, but they're only 4-1 in the SEC. They played one less game. Again, we're not going to have to worry about the ifs, ands, or buts with Texas A&M and Texas. They play each other the last game of the year, so that's going to likely be a decider who gets in between those two. Whoever wins is in. Whoever loses is most likely out. But we're going to get into a crazy tiny tiebreaker scenario if this happens. So Georgia beats Tennessee this week. That makes both of them 5-2 in conference, 8-2 overall. So now they're tied. Alabama or Mississippi wins out here. Which they should with Mississippi State and Florida. That gets them to 6-2, 10-2. So now all of a sudden you have Tennessee, Georgia, Mississippi, all 10-2. And 6-2 in the conference. So they're all tied with Georgia beating Mississippi beating Georgia beating Tennessee in the tiebreakers here. So you have that. Now Alabama wins out. Alabama would be in the same boat. They would be 10-2 with 6-2 in the conference, with their losses being to Tennessee in the tiebreaker, and then they lost to Vandy. But they would have the tiebreaker over Georgia for beating Georgia in that game. So there's another tiebreaker scenario there. Missouri at this point is not looking pretty, but if they won out, they would be 10-2, 6-2 in the conference as well. Issue for them is they would lose the tiebreaker to Alabama and Texas A&M, and the fact that they did not play Tennessee or Georgia, so they don't have a head-to-head against either one of them. LSU at this point, technically with 3 losses, you think they're probably out of it. They only have 2 in conference, though. So if you look at their record there for them, if they beat Florida, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma to finish things up, their tiebreaker losses would be to Texas A&M and Alabama, but their tiebreaker wins would be over South Carolina and Ole Miss. So this thing could get real crazy as far as who ends up where. As there is technically a way that we still work out where there's an 8-way tie for the 2 teams to make the SEC championship game. And then if they make the championship game, then you're going to have 2 teams figure out who else is going to make it the at-large berth. So it is wild because right now you have ranked Texas 3, Tennessee 7, Alabama 10, Mississippi 11, Georgia 12, Texas A&M 15, South Carolina 21, LSU 22, Missouri 23.
Man. Yeah, that SEC
wild.
Is crazy. But I've also heard, and I don't know, it could just be total speculation, but they've talked about like the SEC and the Big Ten even merging somehow to where, that way these SEC teams are not necessarily facing off and beating up on each other, and it would be a little bit more clear cut when you have like Big Ten teams playing SEC teams, down the stretch. You can kind of see who's better, but I don't know. I don't know if that would happen, because that would be all about the money. But
we've got some crazy ones. So Benny, I'm going to put my JT Parlay play of the day together here. You figure out your Plums bet, and we'll finish up the show here. My JT Parlay play of the day. I'm going to build this one for you guys. I got Kansas +3. I'm going to jump on, like I said earlier in the show. Oh, I got to find it on the sheet here. Sorry about that. I've got Penn State. I'm taking Penn State on the alternate line. I'm going to get it down to 28 from it's 28.5 right now. I want to get it right on actually I'm going to get it on the 27. I'm going to play the little extra. I'm going to get it on the 27 even though I think they hit the 28 anyway. Going to put that in there. Then I'm also going to jump on Texas, the 13.5 over Arkansas. I think they take them out, and I like Colorado to win it. I'm going to jump on Colorado. I'm going to move that one down to 10 from 11 on there. So that my JT Parlay play of the day: Kansas +3, Penn State -27, Texas -13.5, Colorado -10. That 4-pick parlay. Oh, it's not showing me the odds on it here. I will have to look up the odds for it, but that's what's going to be. I'll have to tell you what the odds are here in just a second as it's not popping up for me. Benny, you got a Plums bet you like?
Give me Boston College +17 against SMU. Yeah, I just think it's too many points. I think SMU definitely pull it off, but Boston College could make this one scary for SMU. So
there are a few dogs I like this week.
Virginia is another
one.
good one. I think Virginia is probably going to cover the 22.5 against Notre Dame as well. So either one of those, honestly, or you could parlay those two if you wanted to. A couple of dogs right there.
Yeah, so you could get a kind of a dog's bet of the day, which I kind of like that one. And like you said, if I'm looking for some dogs to play, I like Boston College. I like Kansas, and what was the other one you said? Who were you just talking about?
Virginia
and Virginia.
22.5 against Notre Dame.
I do like that one. Do like that one as well. So here I'm putting it together here. For some reason, it wasn't showing me my odds. I'm going to jump back here. So I got Texas -13. I got Colorado -10 here. Colorado -10. Like I said, they're playing really well right now. Utah off that really tough loss. Oh, this is the other one, Benny. I forgot. And there, my Tulane -7 against Navy. I like Tulane. That one's going to get thrown in there. And then I like Syracuse at 8. I tell you what, I'm going to put an all dogs one in there because I do like a couple of these dogs bets that we talked about. But I got LSU minus the 4.5 there. I have the Purdue. I'm going to buy the point down to 27 for Purdue or Penn State, even though I think they clear it. I'm going to give myself a point extra just in case. And then I'm going to finish it up. I like Kansas. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep Kansas out of that one, and I'm going to throw Kansas into my dog bet that I'm going to put on. So right now, here's my JT Parlay play of the day. Benny, throw this one up for everybody. So right now, the bet is Texas -13, Colorado -10, Tulane -7, LSU -4.5, and Penn State -27. You can put that all together in a 5-pick parlay. No boost on this one, but if you wait, you get the boost. 5-pick parlay is plus 1,945. 5-pick parlay plus 1,945. That is going to be the hit. And Benny, real quick here, finish it off the show. Let's do a dog parlay. Let's put on the ones that we talked about here. Let's throw one together for the people.
Ball State came all the way back. They're tied with Buffalo.
Oh, if I hadn't already lost that bet, I'd be upset.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I didn't have the touch it. I missed the touch. So Benny, we got Kansas +3.
Okay.
We're gonna go Kansas +3.
I like it.
We like
Boston College.
Yep, I'm finding that one on here. All of a sudden, looks like there's a lot more games on here than I remember us looking at. Boston College +17.
Virginia
+22.5.
There was one other one we liked.
Syracuse +8.5.
Yeah.
That's a 4-pick dog, all dog parlay, taking all the dogs to cover. That one will get you 4-pick parlay plus 1,228 currently on DraftKings. So 4-pick parlay, repeat it for you guys. Kansas +3, Boston College +17, Virginia +22.5, and Syracuse +8.5. 4-pick parlay plus 1,228.
Nice.
Any final thoughts for you, Benny, before we shut this thing down?
No, man. I think we covered it. I like it. I feel like we were a little overconfident last week. We got a little fired up because the prior week we crushed it, and then but I feel like we came back down to earth. We're making some good picks here, so we'll see what happens.
I like where we're at. All right, week 12, college football slate coming up for everybody. Good luck. May all your bets hit and the trading never quit. We'll check you next time on the Stew with JT Brew on Fantasy and Frames.
You up on trades and why you move? You ain't designed to lose. Find you jumping over seemingly nothing, racking up points, makes the game a little more fun to watch. Can drop release. We started with the mock draft and now we making a mockery of the leaderboard. Quite obviously not a scrub, so start an institute, make evaluations like a commissioner do. It's to the point your wife make you watch in a different room. Update your roster and pick and choose when you get some news. Not much that we enjoy more than sifting through through new statistics to make it to our end zones through different routes. Universities, institutes down to homies who click in groups. I introduce you to the Stew with JT Brew.